Wausau School Board of Education to order. During this meeting, board members will, in many cases, be hearing information presented to them for the first time. Their responses will, in many cases, be extemporaneous and should not be considered either their final opinion on a matter, nor should any opinion expressed by an individual board member during any meeting be considered the opinion of the board as a whole, unless it is presented by the presiding officer as such. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. I would seek a motion to approve the March 18th, 2019 PRL minutes.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstention.
Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the legislative update. I did give all of you a printed copy of that just because there's so many dates and times in this month's legislative update, but I will read through it also. It's budget season in Wisconsin. 4 budget listening sessions are scheduled for this month, down from 6 2 years ago. At the time of this report, 3 listening sessions remain. They are Wednesday, April 10th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. in Oak Creek. Monday, April 15th in River Falls, at UW River Falls. Wednesday, April 24th at UW Green Bay in Green Bay. And then we just learned of something that's not one of these official listening sessions, but our representative Patrick Schneider, along with Amy, I think you pronounce her name Loudenbeck, who is the Assembly Vice Chair of the Joint Finance, the state's Budget Writing Committee, will be at the Marathon County Public Library this Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the Wausau Community Room. So I wanted to make sure you also know about that. That's not in the written minutes, but if you can attend that one, that's probably the most convenient one. The WASB encourages board members and administrators to attend and testify if at all possible. However, if you are unable to attend to testify in person, you can submit written testimony to the committee electronically at the following email address: budgetcomments@legis.wisconsin.gov. Even if you do attend and testify, you may also want to submit written testimony, as the time limits are short: 2 minutes for individuals, 5 minutes for groups. Either way, the WASB asks that you share a copy of your testimony with them. And you can email Dan Rossmiller or Chris Kudlow at the WASB.org website. Dan and Chris have said that knowing the points that you are raising as a district or a board member or administrator and the stories that you are telling helps them do a better job of advocating on behalf of Wisconsin school districts. If you need more details about how the hearings run, check the legislative update section of the WASB website. And while we are on the topic of the budget, I also wanted to share with the board that I was fortunate enough to have a one-on-one conversation with Representative Patrick Schneider, and I stressed with him, because I had limited time, so I thought the most important thing to stress with him was how important an increase to the special education reimbursement rate would be to our district. He assured me verbally that he supports a raise to 30%, and he seemed confident that most of the legislature supports that increase as well. So cross your fingers and hope it makes it to the end of the budget writing process.
In terms of getting our point, of course, if we pass these resolutions tonight, they'll also be sent on to the legislators.
And they can be submitted to the WASB website as well, so that they have those points. And that's coming up a little bit later in the agenda. All right.
I was going to ask Judy, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Judy, but at the National School Board Convention, they talked about how you tell your story, and they talked about it's good if you have a little visual. And the visual that came to my mind was the young people that are working at Aspirus, that the legislature knows that story and also knows the cost. And I don't know if you have time to go to the listening session on Friday. I'm going to be out of town, or I would do it. But some kind of like little video that says, look, this is what our kids are doing. This is where our special ed dollars go for those kids that are at a higher level. And Aspires, is connecting with us. They said you need a visual. Every time you tell your story, you have some kind of visual, because that's an imprint with those legislators.
That's a good point. Appreciate that. Yeah.
All right.
Even just a picture.
Even just it would be good. I think it's very timely tonight. Say our deaf and hard of hearing program that our teachers are going to present, and they have a little presentation prepared, and that also a picture that's very pricey equipment when you're talking sound field systems and microphones and all that. Yeah, I
He said it just goes a much longer way. They've got a visual.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Related to this, we have the proposed resolution to support increasing reimbursement of special ed funding and the proposed resolution to support general state aid increases and corresponding revenue limit increases. And I would like to ask Bob and Amy to just fill us in on where we are with that.
I'll take the second one if anybody else wants the first one, Judy or Amy, special ed one.
I will just say that at the last meeting, the board or the committee members made a suggestion as to year 1 and year 2 reimbursement rate asks. And it was 30% year 1 and 50% year 2. However, in this draft proposal, you will see year 2 increase to 60%, which is totally in line with the governor's ask. And we didn't want to come in below what the governor was asking. So that's the only modification from the discussion from last month.
That makes sense to me.
And Judy, the $18,500 for private school vouchers, and that then private vouchers are reimbursed at 90%, and we're still reimbursed at 24.5. This is one of the questions I get from a lot of people that really are having trouble understanding vouchers. Do we have any children in our area that have children in private schools that are being reimbursed at this price?
Two. We have
Two.
2 private school vouchers right now.
Okay. And they're being reimbursed at this $18,500?
Yes, but similar to the non-special ed vouchers, that's not necessarily money that comes out of our pockets that we could be spending on anything else. It's money
Right.
we tax for. It's money out of the community's pockets, that's for sure, but it's a pass-through, so to speak.
But
Okay.
it could be applied
If they decided to let us tax it and let us keep it, yes.
And I assume we can't know what the dollar amount of that expense above the 18.5. Well, I mean, we don't know what more is coming out of tax monies.
Yeah, I don't know these two particular situations. I can't
Any
say.
other questions or comments related to this first resolution?
I would support this resolution because I agree with what it says about private schools and it makes sense to me. My only concern, and I'd be curious to hear what other people think, is does it politicize it too much? We look at the last 5 provisions on the first page, specifically about private schools. On the one hand, I think it'd be good to get some of that information out, but on the other hand, it may cause the reader to view this as either something they support or something they don't based on what their position is on private schools. I'd hate to have party lines view this statement differently if we don't need to.
I think it's a good point.
So on the one hand, I think that'd be good to get some of this information out about private schools. On the other hand, I think, somebody that supports that might look at this and they might not see what we're saying before that if their focus is, wait, they're attacking private school vouchers with this. And our purpose isn't to attack private school vouchers. Our purpose is to seek more money for special education. And by the time I got done with this, the message I got was, we don't like private school vouchers.
One of the things I think, and I think the intent here is to show the disparity.
Yeah, that was going to be my word.
And that private schools are, if you accept our level of funding, or even if it goes up to the 60%, are inordinately well-funded. But even if it goes to 60, they're still getting 90 above the 18.5. And so I definitely understand that point, and I think we want to pass a resolution unanimously.
Yeah, and
we can
I
change
would
it if
vote
we
in
need.
favor of it because what it says here is accurate.
Yeah,
I'm
but
just saying that the impression I got when I got done reading this is that the purpose of this was to attack private school vouchers, as opposed to the purpose of this was to seek more money for special education
yeah,
funding.
so in other words, that's what's stuck in your mind, and that's what we're worried about, that we end up shifting the conversation to something that we're not necessarily trying
Yeah.
to make the.
And if other people didn't get that impression, then it was maybe just me, and I have no problem supporting it, but that was a worry I had.
Are there some specific ones that get off point that we could take out? For example,
See, if you go down, I just think that it's just very clear that it's unfair. They don't have to be accountable like we do. They don't have to have licensed or special ed staff. And I don't think that we were pitting them against us. I think we were just stating that this is what's not fair in our special ed bill.
Yeah, and I agree that it's unfair that private schools, despite receiving increased funding, are not required to have certified or licensed special education staff. I agree that that's a problem. It shouldn't be that way. But I'm thinking now about how we don't like private education or private school vouchers. I'm not thinking about our original ask, which is
Right. How does that point get us to more money?
how does that, we want people on both sides of the aisle to vote in favor of the governor's proposal for increased special education. And if we
So we
start
want
turning it,
clear
if we
message.
turn it into a public school versus private schools, we're kind of hinting towards some politicians that are in favor of those private school vouchers to reject our message, I guess, is my worry.
Okay, so I think there's four clauses there on the bottom of the first page, the penultimate, and then the three above it. And I believe those are I believe the rest of it's intact. The argument's intact without.
Yeah, the second part of the sixth provision, and then the next 7, 8, 9, 10, 11
Yep, you're right.
be the only ones that it just seemed like, boy, half of this is about private schools.
I think you're right that we don't want to set up a competitive structure and get it politicized. If we can get the funding through, that's the most important point.
Well, I think the point is there already is a competitive structure that we're systematically disadvantaged in over the private schools being systematically advantaged over public schools. And
but is that a
funding.
different issue?
Well,
a different
that I
time?
think is the same. I think that's the point. Is it's a different issue.
Are there some of the points regarding the private school funding that are less inflammatory, just more of a statement of fact that wouldn't tend to create that adversity?
Well, the first full one, which points out the funding that private schools raise, that one doesn't create that much of a it just points out, they've been supported. But as you get further down, and I think it's not just any individual point, it's that there's point after point after point. Half of this resolution is about private schools. Half the provisions. So we start talking about they don't have the same staff, that we have greater accountability. These are all things that I agree with, but I don't think that gets us more support for the governor's proposal. We need support on both sides of the aisle for the governor's proposal to increase special education funding. And going against private schools private school vouchers is not going to be a good way to get support from both sides of the aisle.
Well, should we go point by point and talk about the second part of the sixth one from the bottom, where we say which provides special needs scholarships in the form of vouchers? Should we take that out?
I think if you took that one, the very next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, basically they're on down on that page. They do all fit together. And we have heard from lawmakers, locally at least, it's a non-starter. They don't even engage in the conversation when we start talking about getting rid of vouchers. They're not that interested in the discussion at that point. If you took those out, you left all the rest of them on that page and then the entire second page, you'd still be saying, we're spending a lot of money on special ed, but we're not being reimbursed. And we have a high percentage of 3 different populations that all financially hurt us. We have a high special ed population, we have a high ELL population, we have a high free reduced population. We still capture those points in all the rest of the whereases. And we don't upset people politically. And we might even score some points with some of them if they read what was originally in the resolution and compare it to, because this is an open record right now.
Right.
They read what's in the original resolution, compare it to what we send out, and that might even score some points with some people. The board recognized it was a little bit too political. They removed a couple of things. Something to think about.
I would also strike the second part, I guess, of the whereas for the Wausau School District, the Fund 10 budget, first one, I think it's on the second page. Set a special ed mandate which has impeded the free, appropriate, and equitable education programs and offerings of our 8,308 students. I would put a period and end it there. Because we talk about these as populations who may be underserved, when you have a whole other population that doesn't fall into these, that it looks like you're not really addressing, that the main concern with this is so that you can prop up funding for ethnically diverse, ELL, and free and reduced lunch. I would just leave it after students because we're seeing that the lack of funding in special ed is causing, impediments for all of our students.
And that was
Not
our
just
point
those
when we
three.
discussed it.
Yeah.
So you're right about that.
I think that's a good point.
Anything else?
Okay, so we begin with cutting at 6 with the, after the comma that precedes yet. And then 7, 8, 9, 10 would go away. And the last phrases of, what is that, 11 now?
Amy,
Yeah,
do you
11
think you
would-
have it? Okay.
Yeah. So that last one on the first page would go away.
I wonder if this will get it down to one page
Right.
too, which is more attractive actually, especially if you're reading it aloud.
We'll get it on one page.
Okay. So are we still able to make a motion based on the changes we made in discussion? Because,
Yes.
okay. Anybody else have comment or something that they think needs to be revised? All right, then I would seek a motion to recommend to the full Board of Education the approval of the resolution with changes supporting increasing reimbursement of special education funding to 30% the first year and 60% the second year of the biennium.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And then the second one is, remember last time we talked about how it doesn't do much good to get the reimbursement if it isn't followed by an increase in the revenue limits. So this, and that should be a separate resolution.
And here, we were pretty careful not to say anything bad about property tax relief.
Okay,
In itself, property tax relief is a very good thing.
yes.
But when the budget adds funding, but it doesn't add corresponding revenue limit, it ends up being property tax relief, and that's it. And it's sold as more money for schools, and it's not. So you can read it again. We tried staying away from any suggestion that property tax relief is bad.
Does anybody have any changes or revisions that they want to suggest for this resolution? I think they go hand in hand, these two. Then I would seek a motion to recommend to the full Board of Education the approval of the resolution to support general state aid increases and corresponding revenue limit increases.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next, update on student behavior complaint forms and bullying. And Jean Lloyd will share a brief update on the amount of student behavior complaints, submitted each quarter, including the amount that were confirmed bullying reports. Also an update on the SEL, I'm not sure what that is. So
Social
tell us.
emotional learning.
Okay, vetting process and timeline.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna give you just numbers and then you can ask questions, and I can share some details, not everything clearly. So at the secondary level, I just kind of combined, and I can break them down by school if you would like. I combined quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3 for all the schools. So in first quarter at the secondary level, we had 50 student behavior complaint forms. In quarter 2, we had 50, and in quarter 3, we had 25. So we saw a decrease there. Elementary, this is a learning process for us. So the students were taught in October. So really first quarter, they only had about 2 weeks, and we got 73 of them overall in elementary.
And they have that button that they can press, right?
It's an app,
Okay.
yeah. So a lot of them were accidental, or they did it multiple times, or they were just practicing, those types of things. And then in second quarter, we had 109, and in third quarter, we had 38. So that went down as well. So out of all of those, a lot of them were conflicts. Sometimes they were, a lot of them are like, he's bugging my group of friends. We don't want him talking to us. I heard a swear word at recess, those types of things. But I asked each principal to give me numbers for how many were actually bullying incidences. At elementary, we had 14, and at secondary, we've had 16 this year. So a total of 30 out of our total of about 400 student behavior complaint forms. Questions about that?
Do you think I know it's early because it was just implemented, but compared to prior years, do you think it's helpful, it's revealing more instances of bullying, bringing light to issues that maybe we wouldn't have heard of?
We have some anonymous forms completed, so I think for sure it's helpful with that for kids who don't necessarily feel comfortable coming forward. There's a couple on here, like kind of telling on their friend for skipping class and those types of things, so I don't think those students maybe would have come forward with that. And then we have also had some where the student says, I'm concerned because my friend says they're very sad or depressed. So I think we're catching a lot with this, and that's encouraging. So it's good that we have a platform like this. I haven't heard any negatives about it where people are saying it's not user-friendly, because those are things we want to make sure we fix as well. But
Angie, what about repeat offenders? So of that
Good
30
question.
or whatever it was, are we seeing that
Yeah.
the things that we're using to address their
Yes.
behavior are changing?
yes. So in a couple of the elementaries, it was a few repeaters where we had to bring in the parents and bring it, and have that big conversation with them, and they've seen that then fizzle out, which is good. At the high school level, we've always had in place where we could have a cease and desist form, and we had 2 of those put into place this year, where then our SRO would help enforce that, where those students are to not talk to one another.
Okay.
Angie, of those 30 reports, are there schools that have higher rates of bullying?
Not really. I mean, some are at 0. Our highest is 6, so with those 2 principals, just some conversations around that. Part of our strategic plan, which we'll get to later on, would be some student surveys, so we can really get a good idea of the culture of each building. Maybe some areas we don't know about that because we're not, getting that consistent student voice at this time. So we have some proactive measures in place moving forward with that.
And Angie, going from 109 reports in the second quarter to 38 in the third quarter, on the face of it, that looks like a huge improvement. If you look at the different kinds of complaints that are being made, though, is it maybe also a learning curve that just certain kinds of complaints the students are learning that those really aren't appropriate for this venue?
Yeah.
And so if we look at the kind of complaints that make up the 38, do we see a much greater volume of those kind of complaints among the 109?
Yeah, I would say that we're seeing more, I wouldn't say valid, but more that would require a large amount of attention.
Okay.
We have gotten a few too where SpongeBob and Patrick got in a fight. You know, a couple of goofy ones, but for the most part, kids have taken this very seriously.
Okay.
So we actually were not concerned about that, but thought we would have a higher volume of kids, you know, doing those types of things. Elementary, you know, it's been a lot of learning around. If you tell somebody, then you don't also have to fill this form out, which we had a lot of that happening as well. So we had a couple of principals who were very busy checking into a lot of these, and they figured out they had already told an adult.
When was the peer program expanded again?
January 23rd it opened.
And how many students do we have in that new expanded program?
We have 6 in the new one, and we have the old one as well, where we have 6 as well.
Okay.
Is that 6 actual students, or is that including pending referrals?
We have a couple of pending referrals as well.
Okay, so 6 plus the referrals.
So it went from 8 to 14, but we have room for 28 from the elementary?
Well,
that we're building
the
ahead.
YWCA room is small.
Okay.
So-
But 28 is what we're building up to.
Correct, yeah, that was the original
Yes.
kind of a target number. Frankly, we're having ongoing conversations about, you know, the peer program it's an important tool. So we're constantly talking about how to, you know, not rejuvenate, remodel, resupply. It's just under constant reevaluation. Yeah.
And we are doing vetting of SEL programs, so social emotional learning curriculums. We have money through the DOJ grant. We have an elementary and a secondary group, and both groups decided on the same 4 that we're going to vet. So we're
Wow.
vetting Leader in Me and Choose Love, which that program is free right now, which that's good news. But that one came out, was made by a mom of one of the little guys who was killed in Sandy Hook. So she created that program, and we have Caring School Community and Second Step. So we vetted last Thursday and came out with more questions than answers, so we're gonna have to come back together. You know, we're doing a pretty thorough job of figuring out what we need and if these programs are which one will fit.
And where will those be implemented then? At
That's
every
another
grade
good
level,
question.
or
So
you're not sure?
elementary is pretty easy to implement
Sure.
yet, because you know that the kids are gonna be with the same teacher the majority of the day.
Right.
We already have the 20 minutes built in for morning meeting. Secondary is what we're really gonna have to look at and plan for, because their schedules aren't really conducive with adding a program like this, so that will
Through
be
the health
next year is gonna be our
curriculum, or-
planning year.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of high schools do an extended homeroom. And they have a program that, for instance, they might run a program for a week on judging people. And it's 5 to 10 minutes and in their homeroom, and they talk about that all week and they work on that. And I think that that's something that we have to, it can't be just in health class that you only get it once or whatever, and it's just got to be continuous, and it's got to get kids involved. And the other thing that we learned a lot about at our conference, the National School Board Conference, is students need to be involved in whatever you're going to implement, and they need to know why you're implementing it, and they've got to back it. I don't know how you do that, but before you pick a program, some middle school and high school kids should be involved and have buy-in. I think we heard that.
And a voice.
And a voice. We heard that over and over and over. That's just really important. And so many schools ignore the kids.
We're working on getting more student voice involved.
Good.
A lot of things we do. I think we already do a really good job of that, but just making that consistent every year.
So in a secondary school, does their homeroom stay the same from year to year or not?
It depends.
At West, it does.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, that might be a good place to do it if you've got a group of kids that kind of know each other and trust each other to talk about some difficult things. So that's something to consider too, I guess.
Do you track suspension data monthly
Yes.
for secondary? I would be interested, is that accessible somewhere to us on the website? I mean, I know the DPI has it annually, but I would just be curious
I
to
don't
see what that
know.
Not on
trend
the
looks like.
website. I don't think we publish that.
No. It's not published anywhere.
Okay,
We have that data,
okay.
or we can
Maybe I
compile
can-
that data.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions about it that I can connect with you offline.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And were there any parent reports of bullying?
Not in these forms,
Okay,
no.
but they still have the opportunity,
They
right?
do, yeah.
And so we didn't get
Online.
any?
No.
Okay. Well, that's good.
I don't, anecdotally, the number of the amount of feedback I've gotten this year has dropped significantly
Okay.
from parent, and that's a non-scientific way, but I know last year it was kind of at a pinnacle, and this year it has gone
Okay.
down drastically. Maybe people are accepting it, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a positive trend.
And we're constantly looking for different ways, new ways, what we're, if we're missing anything, so that those are constant conversations that we're having.
Good.
Okay, anything else? Then I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay.
Good stuff.